All right, we're joined now by Daniel McConnell, who's the political editor of the Irish Examiner. It was Daniel who wrote the story about the drugs or the substance about Michael O'Reilly. He's been following the Olympics very closely, and now we have what's going on with Pat Hickey. Daniel, good morning to you.
Morning, Declan.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I was just talking to Noel Rock there, the Fine Gael TD. I was doing my best to defend Pat Hickey and saying he hasn't been charged with anything, and he was calling for him to actually step down. And I was thinking, you know, give the guy a chance. Maybe he doesn't know anything about it. What about the benefit of the doubt? Shouldn't you not wait in all your statements until due process? But what's your take? Has Pat Hickey got a case to answer on all this?
I think he certainly does, and I certainly think that the nature of this scandal has been rolling on for 10 to 12 days now since Kevin Mallon's arrest in Rio. I would certainly think that the manner in which the OCI handled this, the manner in which they stood up to Shane Ross and basically told him to take a hike, the refusal to accede to her demands for independent oversight, that's quite alarming from my point of view. This is a body that gets state funding, and they would argue, well, it's only a small amount of money. I don't care if it's €1 or €100,000 or €1 million. If state money is going in there, we need to be absolutely 100% confident that it's been used in the proper way. And I would certainly think that the nature of this scandal, the charges that Mr. Hickey is now facing, the controversy that it has caused, the embarrassment that it has caused for Ireland, and the fact that it has completely overshadowed, the brilliant kind of achievements of the O'Donovan brothers and Annalise Murphy, and obviously Thomas Barr is going this afternoon. All of that has been completely overshadowed by this scandal. And we have to remember that Pat Hickey isn't just an Irish official now. He's one of the most senior Olympic officials at European level and global level. He's a big player on the international stage. This is a story that is not just resonating here in Ireland. I've been on radio in the UK, on Canada. I'm talking to Australian TV later on this afternoon. But this is a big story. This is a global story. And I would certainly think that Noel Rock, who's been at the fore of this right from the very start, has nailed this in terms of his line of attack. There are an awful lot of questions as to how the tender document the tender for the handing out of these tickets was first given to this Pro 10 company when they seem to be a very small Mickey Mouse company with no ability to sell or distribute tickets on the ground. How did THG or Kevin Mallon, an employee of THG, come to handle these tickets when they had been explicitly warned not to handle OCI tickets? That's question number 2. 3. Are there links between Pat Hickey and the Marcus Evans Group, THG, as Brazilian police are now suggesting? So there's a whole myriad of questions that need to be asked as to whether Pat Hickey was or wasn't involved in all of this, because that's certainly the charges that he now appears to be facing, and that's certainly the belief of Brazilian police that he was involved in all of this. And I think the manner of his arrest yesterday, the nature of it, the fact that they videotaped and all of it has added significantly to the drama of the whole story. But I would certainly think the OCI, Pat Hickey, certainly have an awful lot of questions to answer.
And what do you think of the manner of that? There are an awful lot of people who don't like Pat Hickey, such and feel he's entitled and he's one of these guys who has the prawn sandwiches and everybody else sits in steerage. That type of entitled way of running the organisation, and that's a personal opinion that people have of him and would like to see him down. At the same time, is there a link that we can actually trace from Pat Hickey in any way to any sort of wrongdoing?
Well, I would certainly think that that sort of culture of entitlement, I think, is systematic of the fact that Pat Hickey and a number of the other people have been in charge for so long. I was making the point again this morning that, I've looked at organisations like this across Ireland, where from the HSE to GO to the Irish Red Cross, and what we've seen repeatedly where things have gone wrong is a large concentration of power in a small group, within a small group of people who've been there for an awful long time, who've been able to buttress themselves from attack or challenge from other people. And I would certainly think that sense of entitlement really gets up the noses of athletes. I think we've seen athletes kind of give out about, we're the ones competing, we travel in steerage while the Blazers kind of travel in first class. It's sort of reminiscent of the FAI of old, and the Saipan sort of scandals. I would certainly think, the the OCI has an awful lot of questions to answer around its governance structures. I think its refusal to accede to very basic demands about information is very alarming and very worrying. I think the fact that the manner they snubbed the government of the day, and take the personalities of Shane Ross and Pat Hickey out of this snubbing of a government's request for oversight, I think was very worrying as well. And I think, for the Brazilian police to move on Pat Hickey in this way, to charge him with the charges that they have laid against him, this is incredibly serious. This is not just a kind of a random sort of pickup, but that'll be cleared up in a couple of days. These are very serious charges which, could see him jailed if convicted for up to 7 years. And particularly this issue of a cartel. The Brazilian police clearly think that there's a link between Pat Hickey, Pro-10 and THG. Now, there have been denials about that from the get-go from all quarters, but that's what the Brazilian police believe now at this stage. And obviously we have to allow due process to take place, and we have to allow the investigations to take their course. But I would certainly agree with Noel Rock. I would certainly think there's no way back for Pat Hickey at this stage, and I would think in the good of the organisation, I think it would be best for him at this stage to relinquish the reins and let him defend himself, but let the organisation move on, because I think, there are question marks as to whether or not it can continue. I think there are question marks as to whether or not the state funding should be withdrawn at this stage, pending an investigation, given their refusal to cooperate. And I also think, for the good of the athletes, for the good of the sports, and for the good of public confidence, I think, things have to move pretty quickly. But I've seen precious little kind of evidence from the OCI, and even Willie O'Brien's kind of rather defiant kind of interview, I think it was with Australian television overnight, doesn't give me any sort of comfort to think that the OCI are grasping the nettle on this, or taking this seriously in terms of an accountability point of view.
Right, and he said that the OCI would defend Pat Hickey and the organisation to the hilt. You suggested on the front page of the Irish Examiner today that the funding could be suspended. Has Shane Ross said that, or is that just a feeling around government?
That is coming from senior government sources that I spoke to last night. Now, Shane Ross obviously was travelling home last night, so I didn't actually get a chance to speak to him directly or get an exact steer from him. But I think there was a hardening in the government position last night to say, that the Hickey arrest was significant. It was a turning point, a game changer in how this sort of saga and the relationship was playing out. I think there was an unhappiness without question with Pat Hickey and the OCI's refusal to accede to those government requests at that meeting on Sunday night or Monday morning. So I think there is a kind of a growing political momentum towards a judicial-led external inquiry, which will basically override any sort of kind of niceties about independence or whatever like that. And I think if the OCI continue to stonewall, then I think the question of pulling its funding has to be considered.
How long will this go on now?
We don't know. We just don't know. I mean, we obviously, I think what will determine things most is the speed at which Pat Hickey's interrogation takes place, because it'll ultimately be for a court and a judge to decide whether the charges laid against him are credible and are worthy of prosecution. And that will determine how long he stays in jail, or when he's able to come home, what sort of battle he will have to face. I mean, given the fact that they have seized his passport, I mean, I would certainly think the chances of him coming home to Ireland anytime soon are remote to slim at all. And therefore you then have to ask the question, well, what happens to the OCI in his absence? Do they continue to play hardball? But certainly I would think any investigations this side of the water will be determined by what happens in Brazil. And that's a waiting game, because the courts are out of season at the moment. There are a couple of special...
Yes, right. Okay, thanks for your time, Daniel. Good morning to you. Thank you. Daniel McConnell there, political editor of the Irish Examiner, about the fallout of what is going on there. As regards Rio, and we watched this space, it was about 11:30 yesterday morning when we actually heard those unconfirmed reports that Pat Hickey had been arrested, which proved to be accurate in the end.